right, go.
Today, when leadership is discussed, we usually purport to be discussing what leaders do rather than what they say, as if this were a more clear-eyed approach. The truth is, when we look closely, we see leadership as much as what our leaders symbolize, as in what they accomplish. Whatever the case, our obsession with leadership seems to be constant, if not growing. The mythology of leadership, however, can be a growing source of frustration if we don't come to a more clear-eyed sense about why this is so and why it matters to us. Leaders, Myth and Reality examines not only individual traits of leaders we dub geniuses, heroes, reformers, power brokers, zealots, and founders, but the mythology behind why and how we as humans follow such people, whether for good or bad. We find that as we learn more about those that we follow, we learn more about ourselves and our desires for inspiration and guidance. This morning, we welcome the 14th president of the National Athletic Trainers Association, Tory Lindley, to dive deeper into the three myths of leadership and how we define leadership in our ever-changing and evolving profession. Tory, welcome back to the Sports Medicine Broadcast, and good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning to both of you. Thanks for this opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you for being on today. I know you're a busy guy, and Jeremy, I know you had a football game last night, so.
Yep, late night. So this is sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/leadership myths. Again, sportsmedicinebroadcast.com/leadership myths. So as John mentioned, Tory's back on the podcast. So he was on when he was making his presidential bid. So I was part of the campaign trail, and then he was on at the convention in New Orleans. He was on when we talked about the Strategic Alliance. And Tory has also joined the Sports Medicine Broadcast just recently with Alicia Pennington when we were in Las Vegas. And that episode will be releasing later this year. There's if you look at his bio, there's lots of awards, Hall of Fame inductee into Illinois Athletic Trainers Association, published over a dozen articles, or been part of those. GLADA Award, and it says the Golden Pinnacle, which is the highest award that they offer. He was also the head athletic trainer of the year at one of the D1 schools. I'm sorry, I forgot to write that down. And then also his wife and 3 children, and I just saw that Tory, you're what looks like your oldest, because it's listed first, is named Jonah, and that's also the name of my firstborn son. So we got that in common.
Nice.
All right, so now we want to know something interesting or unique that wasn't included in your bio.
Interesting or unique? Well, I think that's a difficult thing, because I think that's defined by those that might or might not find it interesting or unique. Since you just talked about my children, I think there's plenty of interesting and unique within that group of 3 that we're really proud of. But we're excited to be empty nesters nonetheless, and that's been, I think, pretty timely in terms of what opportunities the NATA presidency and continued work with the NATA board of directors has afforded. And so I won't lie when I say that, from a life balance standpoint, I don't necessarily ignore Beth, but having all 3 children out of the house, one of which is off the payroll, 2 of which are, highly successful in their own, collegiate careers, academically, socially, and athletically. For Evan, who's a volleyball player at NYU, I think it's timed out really nicely to be NATA president during this kind of phase of our life. So I don't know if that's unique or interesting, but I'll steer back to Evan. It's been much easier to tell stories and advocate for athletic trainers, advocate for standard of care at the collegiate level, advocate for youth sports, healthcare, and raising standards there, when I've had 3 children go through a variety of youth sports, have a collegiate athlete and Evan as a volleyball player at NYU. And so, relating to those stories and being relatable as a parent has been a unique perspective that a lot of people have enjoyed hearing, that kind of angle as well. So hope that's unique enough for you, Jeremy.
That'll work.
That works for me, absolutely. So let's dive right into the questions that we had formulated from the book. I know we've talked about it so far throughout this series. We've taken a much deeper dive, a little bit more of a thought-provoking dive into the idea of leadership and leadership within athletic training. This book really does provide us with more of a mythological thought process when it comes to leaders. So the book itself has 3 myths that encapsulate the idea of leadership from a historical standpoint, and why we need to look at leadership through a different way. So first question, we wrongly believe that what happens in one leadership instance can be replicated in another. This leads to 3 myths which help us navigate the understanding of leadership. The first of these myths is the formulaic myth. Ignoring the reality that leadership is contextual, we feel that leaders stick to a strict checklist that leads to success. Tory, do you feel that the formulaic myth is effective in leading others?
I don't believe that a checklist approach, can be appropriately or successfully instituted. Learned this lesson in a couple of different ways, both in athletic training leadership through service, as well as athletic training leadership and clinical leadership within the setting that I practice, which is the collegiate setting, and having, served as the director of athletic training services and managing staff on a day-to-day basis in Division III and Division I non-Power 5, and then currently in Division I Power 5. And I only reference the different levels based on what type of potential opportunities there can be with different resourcing of sports medicine programs. So what I've found is, to be quite the opposite, which is, the formulary approach, or, some of the standardization of how I can go into a conversation, given the stakeholder that I'm working with directly, and to be able to provide a way to maybe, defend them or empower them or create, opportunities for them to succeed, certainly isn't from, one particular approach or one particular, set of 4 or 5 things that I might want to check off in those conversations. So it very much is, based on that individual person that I'm working with, or a small group that I'm working with, or perhaps a staff, and the varying differences of what those groups might look like in either athletic training leadership or within clinical leadership. And so, adaptability is critical, and knowing your audience is critical as well, I think, to be an effective leader.
Yeah, you want to rely on the individual strengths of those that are a part of your team, right? If you go with a standard checklist, it really doesn't apply to everybody's strengths. So somebody may be strong in one aspect, and you want to apply that checklist to them, and that may not help them prosper with their strengths. It helps you become a little bit more fluid rather than trying to have everything off of a checklist. It may seem easy to have everything off a checklist, but when you start applying to those, you realize that it's not a really good leadership trait.
Yeah, in fact, that's become one of the strengths, I believe, of our program here at Northwestern University, in the sense that when we figured out as a group that our biggest strength could be capitalizing on individual strengths within our clinical set, for one, but certainly it could be applied in other areas, that we became stronger. So if we asked ourselves the question, if we knew some individual clinical strengths of every single one of our, X number of staff members, which currently is 20, and we're able to capitalize on those individual clinical strengths, then how great could we be as a healthcare system? Same thing could apply to the NATA board of directors. And I've tried to take that same approach in identifying the strengths of individual district directors and what their own individual or even small group collective strengths would be, and be able to capitalize on those leadership strengths in order to best serve our profession.
On Wednesday, we talked with Kevin Parker and we discussed the idea of heroes as leaders. And that kind of leads into our next myth question. When we view leaders in hindsight, we see that their vision or mission can far outweigh those that surround the leaders themselves. The attribution myth questions who is more important, the leader or the follower?
Is both an answer?
It can be.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting because of the idea that, if you're a skilled leader, and that's certainly a wide definition of what skilled can be or not be, then you're taking into account those that you're leading, and by definition, then the followers. So the mix of a leader that's able to respond and adapt. I mentioned that word before. The versatility of the leader to adapt to those that he or she is leading, which again would be the followers, allows for the building of strengths within that particular organization. So I guess I don't want to cop out and say both. I probably lean toward the opportunity that most leaders would have, and so maybe the leader is slightly more important. But if they're doing their work effectively, then they are turning to those that they're leading to help guide the group, as opposed to it being more kind of unilateral leadership, so to speak. Some leadership styles that I've come across as a follower, I've learned a lot from. So that's part of this idea, and I like this debunking this myth, because I think we look up to our leaders oftentimes and are trying to glean from them in ways that we can be better ourselves. But I think there's also a lot to be learned from those that are ineffective as leaders, and I certainly have learned a lot. Won't name anybody, but a lot from those that I've worked along with. I thought, that's a trait that I don't want to have. That's an approach that I don't find effective as a follower. That is something that, whatever that is, X in the moment, is something that I will absolutely make every effort to avoid as a leader. So I would lean toward the leader, but both are really, really important.
Yeah, we learned a lot about that when we talked to Dr. Shingles in that the zealot section and the bad leaders, right? I've always felt, or at least in my more recent part of my career, I've felt that I've learned more from the bad leaders in a weird way from the good leaders. The good leaders are always going to be there, and they always have that wisdom to follow and learn from. But in a way, you can only learn from your own experiences when it comes to wisdom. And a lot of the times I've found that I've learned more from those bad leaders and taken away what I shouldn't do in certain situations and dealing with other people and going forward. But it does prove the point that leadership is extremely contextual, right? Where, a good leader can lead, but a lot of times it depends on the followers. So it goes back, Jeremy, when we talked about extreme ownership, there are no bad teams. There's only bad leaders. And a lot of times people will feel that leadership is terrible or the teams are bad, but it really does come down to sometimes the leader. But if you don't have a strong team, if you don't have the right people pressing them, then the mission is never going to get accomplished. The vision, no matter how strong it is never going to be accomplished.
So just taking a look at our football game last night, right? So traditionally, like since I've been here this 13 years, we have won 4 games one time, and every other season has been less than 4 wins for football. However, last night when we were playing a school that's going to be making the playoffs, either the 3rd or 4th position in the playoffs, for the first half, the score was 16-12. That first half, like our kids were giving it everything. They were aggressive. They were playing hard, and that's how they've been doing all season. And like you said, they're not a bad team. They're outmatched, right? But the leadership that they gets that from them, gets the best that it can get from them. It gets the kids excited. And in there, it's most of the same kids that we had last year. And so really it's a change in leadership that's made the biggest difference in the culture in just the 1 year here at my school. And so it's really cool to see as we talk about this stuff, those changes there that's really making the difference. And so I kind of agree that the leader is slightly more important because they have to take the strengths and they have to put those together and make them work together of what's already there. You just have to kind of bring it out.
You almost rely on the individual strengths, going back to that first myth in your team, right? It's like a 51-49%. What's more important, but it's incredibly close, whether it's the team or the leader, right? But you talked about culture. How important is it to have the most appropriate culture in a team or in a leadership setting?
Tory?
Rhetorical or direct?
Both.
Well, I'll take it. Yeah, it's no doubt important, and it's the environment that you create, and that's, part of why I've stopped using that C word, because I think too often people that I've been working with from a leadership standpoint, don't go beyond the word, don't try to define the word. We have to be able to define what we're talking about. We have to be able to back it up. We have to be able to demonstrate it on a day-to-day basis. So it's the environment that you create. It's the behaviors that you're looking for. It's the behaviors that you're expecting and wanting to be demonstrated. And then it's celebrating success when those behaviors are reflective of what the group values. And that obviously requires you to define what you value as a group or as an organization, in this case, a healthcare organization, or maybe a board of directors, or an executive committee, or any type of committee that you're a part of. And so that to me is the reminder, and more important to continually define what you're seeking and what you're looking for, versus just using the word and having the word be empty and not backed up by the what and the why and the how.
Okay, so go a little bit more into just why you said you don't like to use the word culture. To me, it sounds like culture, if you think about my culture, it's my grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-great-great-grandparents, that kind of thing, and what that history has done. And then if you think about the environment, it's kind of like the immediate area that you're in. Is that more or less why you try not to use cultures, because it's too hard to change?
No, I think what I'm trying to get to is the actions of continually reminding each other and working together to sustain what we have established in terms of expectations and environment, which are all value-based, and trying to surround our healthcare team. And I'm, again, pretty exclusive right now in this discussion as an example to our group at Northwestern. So, continual reminders as we've grown bigger as an organization. When I started here at Northwestern, I was a part of a staff of 9 athletic trainers. We currently have 20 working directly with intercollegiate athletics, and 3 more working with our club sport athletes. And so when you get bigger, it's critical. And, there are examples of this that go from 20 to 200. So, mine is, basically doubling in size. So how do you manage to continue with new staff, but with staff that's spread out and multiple staff, and you lose some of the intimacy? How do you do that? And, what we're living every day should be that C word. It's the environment and the behaviors and the actions that we take on that are value-based. So I'll go back to values. And for us, it's things like enthusiasm, valuing life balance, valuing the importance of communication, valuing teamwork, and then valuing professionalism. And those aren't given in any particular order. But if our organization understands and has defined, and we have taken the time to not only establish our values, but define what that looks like, then we are more apt to carry those things out by definition, and carry those things out by behaviors with our patient population, with each other, with our other stakeholders within our healthcare organization, our physicians, our specialists, interprofessional delivery of care, patient-centered care, all the things that we're striving to do. We lean back on our values, and then we celebrate our successes. And when we see teammates demonstrating our values, and demonstrating those behaviors, we recognize those. Everything that I talked about leans in on what we've defined as our own culture. But to simply say, culture is important to us without defining it, I think it becomes potential cop out, or it becomes empty, and that's how you lose that consistency in the environment and the behaviors, is to only talk about it as a one word versus a full definition of what you're looking for.
Do you ever see those motivational posters that are up in office buildings? The ones that read, drive on or whatever, and it's just a simple picture. The first time you see it, it has a little bit of meaning to it, and it's like, all right, I'm gonna attack my Monday. And then Tuesday comes around and Wednesday rolls around, and it's like that picture means absolutely nothing to us anymore. It's almost kind of what you're talking about, right? It's the action of driving towards your meaning and what your values are that will continuously reinforce what you want out of those things, right? It's easier to put a picture on the wall that says this is what our culture is, but never act on it. The more you act on it, the more meaning your culture has, the more meaning your community has in accomplishing what you want done and what your goals are for the year. At the beginning of the year, we created a 7-goal poster that hangs up in my office, and that's for my staff that we look at. And I realized that the first couple times when we went over those goals, what our daily goals are, what we want to accomplish with our student athletes, it had a lot more meaning to it, and we attacked our day and attacked our student athletes with more meaning and value, and then we didn't look at it, or it's right in front of me, but I didn't see it. Mm-hmm. And I think a week ago somebody had said something about it, and I said, you know what, it's funny because it's right in front of me, but I haven't looked at it. And I need to reevaluate those things, because are we accomplishing those goals that we set forth 2 months ago? And when we were able to do that, then we had more meaning going back into that day. So as soon as 2:30 hit, school lets out, we had more emphasis on how we were going about our day and talking with our student athletes and communicating with coaches and doing evals and rehabilitation. We had more meaning to those things. So it is easy to put a poster up and say, this is what it is. But if you don't attach meaning to it and you don't act on it, then there's really no point in doing it anymore, right?
Yeah, those are really good examples. It's kind of like I liken it to a clinical analogy of, early in our career, we were told by our mentors and by our professors to stop calling, medial or lateral shin pain shin splints. Shin splints to me is like a garbage pail term, like culture. You can say culture, you can say shin splints, but you have to define it for it to have any type of meaning for those that you're working alongside it.
We say that leadership is a process of driving groups of people towards outcomes. Productive leaders require others to find sense of purpose and meaning in what they represent. Tory, how important is it to have meaning in our profession?
It's critical, and I'll stick back to the home example here of our clinical team. Is early on in the onboarding process and transition to practice process here, we talk a lot about purpose. That's one of the most important things that our leadership team can do for new ATs within our system is make sure that they understand their purpose. There are other things that are important, like autonomy and the ability to be innovative and support an innovative and curious environment. But purpose is critical. We in athletic training probably haven't done a good enough job of not necessarily emphasizing a job description, but paying attention to a job description and assuring that when healthcare providers are leading other healthcare providers, that job descriptions are appropriate, that they're well written, they're as robust as they need to be, but they're also flexible. It's a good place to start when you're thinking about purpose. But purpose, also bleeds into, what other roles and what other expectations, the group or the leader has for those that they're working with and in their own particular team. And so we really try to define and then revisit purpose throughout that first year of work within our athletic training team. And I found that to be a I don't know how long ago we started to emphasize purpose, but once we did, it's really helped. And I can go into some more of the subtle differences, but different, just briefly, different patient populations, have a different defined purpose within our organization. Some of the stakeholders are different. That might be the coaches, that might be the parent population, that might be the student athlete or patient population specifically, and that is part of what we visit and revisit, and other things that might relate to healthcare administration and some of the duties that we spread throughout our staff lend to that purpose and help empower people to feel like they're really contributing on a day-to-day basis. And we try to recognize that as well, instead of taking for granted all the things that we expect. And that's also part of, I think, the 360 of making sure that purpose is well-defined and then revisited.
Jeremy?
All right, so obviously you've had a lot of opportunity to be in leadership. And so do these leadership opportunities follow you because you're a leader, or does the opportunities are there and then you follow them? Do you understand?
I think I do, and you have to seek them out, in my opinion. I don't think they've ever really found me. I think there have been opportunities, maybe on occasion, where I've been asked to participate in something. I've always looked at it as they need additional help, or some additional effort and more person power, versus, oh, they're seeking me out because I might be able to bring something to the table. Maybe that's a little self-deprecating, but I've never really thought of something as having found me. I've always approached it as I've got to find it and have a specific path in terms of my career, and then have a lot of really intentional choices when it's come to service and how leadership, along the lines of service within multiple organizations have been a choice that I've made and things that I've sought out to do. And some of those were connected to elections that I've been fortunate enough to win, and others, have simply just been me raising my hand. And, those are some of the things that I like to talk to young professionals and students about, that, giving back to the profession can come in a number of different ways. A lot of students look at, either when they're hearing me speak or when they're, just thinking about their mentors, they only look at running for an office within a state association or district or national, and, giving back to the profession. There are a number of examples. Jeremy's a really great example of owning his own impact in the profession and creating, what he has created with his podcast. There are so many scholarly activity opportunities. There are so many ways to get involved, and that give back has usually, been by choice for me, and then has led to some really cool leadership opportunities based on the people I've been able to work with.
Okay. I appreciate the kind words there, and I was just taken back for a second. And me personally, let me switch over to here. I don't feel like I was ever intentional about finding those. There was a time where I helped with the Jihad's website, and I made a big difference there, but it was really just, we were in a meeting and they said, hey, the guy doing the website is kind of retiring from doing it, and we need somebody that can do it. And I said, oh, well, I might be able to do it. Tell me more about it. And so it really was just that same opportunity. Like, I raised my hand and said, I can help. And then from there, I met lots of other people who are leaders and athletic trainers and have created those friendships. And that's opened up other opportunities. And I was asked to help with like the SWATA website and this and things like that. And so for me, it wasn't intentional. Like, I wasn't like, okay, I want to be here. These are the steps I need to get here. It was just like, here, I can help. And then now I'm seeing that. But honestly, in general, I would say my life, like, I'm not a goal setter. I'm just kind of like, all right, well, let's just go for it. Let's just see what happens. And so I think if I had been more of a goal setter, or even today, if I was still more of a goal setter, I could see those opportunities coming about, because I said, okay, well, this is where I want to be. And again, I think it's fantastic that you're sharing with young professionals about setting goals, because maybe somebody did share with me and I just didn't listen, but I don't feel like I had somebody saying, hey, you need to set a goal, think about your future, what do you want to do in the long run?
I found the times that I've reached out for, leadership positions and I didn't get them. It wasn't meant to be. And we talked about the ego, right? We want to have that ego kind of melt away or have a negative ego. And the times when I've tried to be more humble, leadership positions have found me. And when they find you, it's more impactful on a personal level because you become more of a servant for the people that you want to serve.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's a really well stated approach, and I don't think that's just dumb luck. I think that probably happens very much how you described it.
All right, so the next big question, if we're changing the word from culture to environment, we're reshaping or redefining athletic training. How do we continue to redefine leadership in athletic training?
These are really good steps. I think there's a lot of opportunity in our profession to build better mentoring relationships, not only to emphasize the importance of mentoring, but to do a better job and being a little more formal about what good mentoring really looks like. I think that number one opportunity for us right now is ongoing. Preceptors make incredible mentors, but good preceptors make even better than incredible mentors. And so, developing better preceptors in our athletic training education, programs, and being a great preceptor is one of those ways to give back to the profession that we talked about. And, the preceptor development can come very formally. And so we've done that. NATA and some of our committees underneath the umbrella of the ECE have the preceptor training modules that I would encourage anyone who's working with athletic training students on a regular basis to look very strongly at, because better mentoring, better clinical education through our preceptors is a way for our profession to advance. What that gets into is soft skills. It gets into professional preparation. It gets into better understanding of post-professional education opportunities. And we're certainly at a crossroads there as a profession with, the degree change, which then leads to the elimination of a long time, kind of automatic post-professional opportunity or track with the graduate assistantships. And with those going away, students are wondering what is that for me? What is that going to look like? So I go back to better mentors, better educated, better clinical preceptors across the board. That, along with better definition of what transition to practice is, and these all meld together, which we're also doing and creating setting by setting with the different committees under the umbrella of NATA that are setting based, and identifying more clearly what transition to practice means for an athletic trainer in a rehabilitation clinical setting, an athletic trainer working with a physician, an athletic trainer working at the secondary school setting, and we know what the settings are. So that's going to be a big step as well. So back to your original question, I think it starts with better mentors and our opportunities to help generation by generation understand a lot more than just what they're learning within their AT program.
I am currently a mentor for my new coworker. So Sophia graduated in 2017. This is her first full-time job at a high school in our district, has a mentorship program. And so I was talking to John earlier this week, and I have to do like 20 hours worth of mentor training on how to be a mentor. And, honestly, I was like, this is really ridiculous. Like 20 hours, you could have shown me how to use the software in 1 hour and been done. Right. But then now having this conversation with you, Tory, it's like, okay, maybe I do need to learn how to be a better mentor rather than just somebody there with her. But continuing to check in on her and asking her those questions. What do you need right now? How do you feel like we're doing on this? What can we improve? Asking her for reflection on what she's done. And so I really appreciate it. This is what we're moving towards as an organization, as NATA, as athletic trainers, is creating better mentors, because it will reshape what we're doing. And it's really cool that John's doing this, that you're mentioning this, that it's actually playing out in my life right now, because for me that really reaffirms this is the right thing to do. Continue doing this. And then we're looking at the University of Houston as a really good MAT program, and once she's settled here in her position, then we want to bring on a student so that she can be a preceptor there as well, and create that same environment and create the same opportunity for growth and questions and learning. And so I'm glad that we're doing this as an organization.
Yeah, and hats off to you. I'll let John, I know John's ready to jump in as well. One of the things that you're describing, I left out of that, which is the professional preceptor. That's also what healthcare looks like in terms of transition to practice. And so I'm not telling you, Jeremy, that you're not a mentor for her, but you're probably, and you don't know it, you're really, because of the organization that you're working in together, much more of a professional preceptor. And that's something that we have not done at all as a profession. And she needs both. And she needs both for the rest of her career, especially as a young professional. But we can carry professional preceptors, people we can lean on within our organization besides our supervisor to point us in the right direction. And that's some of what you're doing. But I'm sure you're also doing some of the things that mentors do, which are let's talk through that discussion or conversation you had with the parent, and how did that feel, and let's talk about your future goals as a professional. So there's some subtle differences, but highlighting what a professional preceptor can do, that's what healthcare looks like, and that's a really important step for us.
Yeah, it's so incredibly important to be a mentor and to have a mentor yourself. I found that being a mentor with my interns and the interns that I've passed and have become professionals, to keep that contact. It's not just for them, it's for the mentor themselves. It keeps you fresh, it keeps you engaged, it keeps you, it gives you more meaning in your day-to-day practice as an athletic trainer. And that's what I've found over the recent years is the more I have put into my interns, the more I've gotten back from it. And that has been so incredibly impactful for me, to that. Hopefully I'm making a difference with them, but I'm also making a difference within their student athletes' lives, and our community in our area that we continue to work in.
Well said.
So on the recent, on an episode of Polos and Khakis with Dan and Lizzie, you stated ATs need to take care of their own shop and be the best professional they can be. And is very similar to one of my new favorite authors, Jordan Peterson, who states, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. A lot of times we see some athletic trainers have almost a nihilistic tendency and become very disillusioned with the profession. How important is it for us to be the best professional and to take care of our own shop per se before we go out and have a negative outlook on the profession?
It's essential, and I would argue, and I'm trying to advocate for this idea, and wrote about it early in one of my NATA News, articles. If that happens, and if we first have to define what that is, and I'm not sure we've done a good job of doing that, but define some of the pillars of being a good to great professional. That is going to push our profession forward. That is going to raise the tide for all, and that's going to better shape what the view in each of us have that role and have that potential impact with those that see what we do on a daily basis. And that's our outside stakeholders that can be advocates for athletic training or may choose not to, because the example that they're looking at on a day-to-day basis or a one circumstance basis, if it's a per diem AT, if it's an injury to their child at a secondary school, it's their snapshot of athletic training. And so, taking care of our own, space first. House, maybe perfect's a little strong of a word that you used with the author that you spoke of, but doing the best we can to take care of our space first, that's going to do so much, a ton really, for us professionally. Then you probably, if you're doing those things, you probably don't have that negative attitude because you're probably showing your value to a higher level. That's going to create a better working environment for you. It's going to give you more ground to stand on, to negotiate for a better salary, for better working conditions. Part of taking care of your own house is going to make sure that you have other colleagues that you connect with. Even if you're an athletic trainer who's flying solo in any setting, but let's again look at the secondary school setting. If you've connected with other ATs in your conference and you have those relationships to build best practices off of each other and discuss the ways in which everybody can be better, you're going to be better and have less complaints. I can keep going, but the idea is if you take a really strong look and take care of you first, and I didn't even touch on self-care, but it's also a part of that. That's going to make you more emotionally intelligent, and that's going to play into job satisfaction. Then you probably have less to complain about. And if and when you can look in the mirror and feel like you've managed yourself to the best of your ability and all those areas are covered in some of the pillars that I wrote about, then sure, let's have a conversation about ways in which maybe your organization can support you better. You can have a different or better platform from which to advocate for yourself or for your patient population. And maybe there's an opportunity there for the organization with you alongside of others to create more solutions for some of the challenges that we have. That would be something that I would look to fondly and smile pretty wide to know that that's happening. That's certainly an opportunity for us to get better.
I think that was a great answer for those athletic trainers that may question what is something that the NATA or others are doing for them. Well, what are you doing for yourself to create your own value first before relying on the other people? I think when I started to do that more in my career, I realized I was gaining more from myself and more for my athletes than relying on other people because I didn't take ownership of those things at first. And we talked with Dr. Games earlier in the season, and we talked about creating that value within ourselves, but through self-care. And that's so incredibly important. I think sometimes people become disillusioned with the work-life balance type phrase, almost like the culture phrase that we talked about. People rely on that a little bit more than acting upon it. And if they don't act upon it, then they're not going to get anything out of it. And they will become disillusioned with the idea of their own value if they don't take some ownership.
Absolutely.
Jeremy, do you have any other questions?
No, I feel like we've covered a lot of things that I wanted to know here again as we're talking about redefining, and it really is just a matter of me listening to people who have gone a little bit further on the journey